A recent panel on CNN discussed Donald Trump's barbaric immigration policies, and more specifically, they addressed how the Department of Health and Human Services lost track of almost 1,500 immigrant children. Now, when you hear about this story, I think the knee-jerk reaction from conservatives is that, look, see, this is evidence that government doesn't work. These large bureaucracies, they just don't function well, which is why we need to cut the size of government. But I mean, do you really want to make this argument right now when Republicans are in control of all branches of government? You guys are in control of everything. So if you're saying government doesn't work, what you're implying there is that you don't know how to govern. But nonetheless, this panel was really interesting to watch, and it kind of went off the rails when former United States Senator Rick Santorum essentially said, you know what, it's not really our problem, meh. Which then resulted in Nina Turner essentially having to teach him about human empathy. So I'm going to show you the clip, but before I do that, I want to provide you with some much needed context because I think there's a lot of confusion about this issue in particular. So according to Amy Wang of the Washington Post, in the recent days, outrage about treatment of children taken into U.S. custody at the southwest border has reached a fever pitch, exploding in a barrage of tweets and calls to action with the hashtags We Are the Children and Missing Children. Did the United States really lose track of 1,475 immigrant kids? In short, yes. During a Senate committee hearing late last month, Stephen Wagner, an official with the Department of Health and Human Services, testified that the federal agency had lost track of 1,475 children who had crossed the U.S.-Mexico border on their own, that is, unaccompanied by adults, and subsequently were placed with adult sponsors in the United States. Health and Human Service officials have argued it is not the department's legal responsibility to find those children after they are released from the care of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which falls under HHS's Administration for Children and Families. And some have pointed out that adult sponsors are sometimes relatives who already were living in the United States and who intentionally may not be responding to contact attempts by HHS. Now, is it the case that a lot of these sponsors are just not responding? Sure, that's certainly a possibility, but is it also the case that some of these children are in danger? Yes, that's also a very real possibility. It could be the case that some of them even fell into the hands of traffickers, but we don't know overall, which is why we're concerned. Now, to be clear, the nearly 1,500 children being referenced here and elsewhere, they weren't actually separated from their parents at the border. They arrived at the border alone, as the article stated. But with that being said, children that do arrive at the border with their parents are actually taken away due to a new policy implemented by Donald Trump's administration. So on May 7th, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that the Justice Department would begin prosecuting every person who crossed the southwest border illegally, or at least attempt to prosecute 100%, even if some of them could or should be treated as asylum seekers, as the American Civil Liberties Union has argued. The consequence of this new 100% policy is that children will be separated from their parents as the kids are charged with a crime, even if the adults are seeking asylum and present themselves at official ports of entry. So, generally speaking, families are in fact being separated at the border, but with respect to these children, the 1,500 who were lost, they did arrive by themselves. So I think that clarification is important. But the fact that we're unable to account for them is extremely problematic, and the response from various agencies has essentially been them trying to downplay the situation, saying, well, you know, they're probably just not returning calls. But I mean, again, it's possible, but we don't know that for sure, and given this administration's treatment of immigrants, I don't think that they give a damn even if these kids were in danger. So that's why Americans with a heart are concerned about these children. It may very well be the case that HHS is correct and, you know, their sponsors aren't responding. That may be, you know, the majority of cases here. But at the same time, they could very well be in danger. The fact is that we want to know and we care. We want to make sure that they're not in danger. We want to make sure that they're not in the hands of traffickers. We care, which is why we are concerned. I think there's a number of conservatives who are concerned as well because a lot of people try to be decent and realize, yeah, it's possible these children could be in danger. And since they were, you know, they came to the U.S., they were in our jurisdiction, it was our responsibility to look after them. But the government's basically saying, not really our problem. So now that you have the context, I do want to get to the CNN clip that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, because Rick Santorum essentially echoed what the government has been saying. Really, the parents are to blame, and it's not really our problem. And Nina Turner, I think, did a really good job teaching him about human empathy.
The idea that 100% of these sponsors are going to check in, of course, that's never going to be the case. There's always going to be problems. People move. They don't feel, we don't have to check in anymore. We've gone someplace else. So the idea that they're, quote, lost, I think is an overestimate, is hyperbole to try to create an issue. I don't really think there is one, other than the fact that the bureaucrocy, surprise, doesn't work very well.
1,500 children being lost is not an issue, then there's something definitely wrong.
I think the idea that they're lost, they are placed with families that have been previously
And the government has said they have lost track of them. That's another word for lost.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that these kids are out. There are logical explanations. And again, we're talking about a government system, and we all know, Bill and I will sit here forever and tell you how inadequate a lot of these government agencies are at doing a lot of things. I mean, we lose people all the time in a lot of other government programs.
Let me just bring in some. It's not just Democrats who are saying this. Conservatives also have been outspoken about being upset about this.
I want all of us to put ourselves in the place of those mothers or those fathers, or, as Patty was saying, we're both mothers. I mean, I can't even dream of a situation where my son would be torn from my arm.
With all due respect, these parents are putting their children in peril by putting them and coming across the border. They may or may not. You don't know their situation. Some may be. Some it may just be an economic issue. There may be all sorts of reasons people come here.
To me, that's not the point anymore.
It is the
moral. No, the point
is the point because you want to discourage that behavior.
The point is that we have children's lives at stake here.
But the parents are putting their children's lives at stake. Let's get to the bottom line.
No, the point is that
the parents are putting these children in danger by doing what they're doing.
America has a moral obligation to those kids that is larger than what the parent may have done.
The moral obligation is to deter that type of activity.
And the children be damned? The children be damned?
Not be damned.
You can use the children as a pawn.
At some point, the parents have to take responsibility for their children.
We're going to use the children as a pawn, though.
At some point, parents have to take responsibility.
Bill Crystal, go ahead. You want to get in?
I'm just saying, one can believe that some of these parents may be behaving irresponsibly. One can also believe that as a matter of policy, it is unwise and cruel to take their kids away from them. And there are other ways you can punish.
We take kids away from parents who do illegal acts all the time, and we put parents in jail.
We don't lose. We're not
right. We don't lose. Exactly right.
I guarantee
What's the excuse for losing these children?
Patty, that millions of kids over the course of this country whose parents have been put in jail have been, quote, lost in the system. And you know that to be true.
We can't justify this. It cannot be justified, and this president is going the extra mile to push this narrative.
Should there be?
I wish you had the outrage for parents who were jailed as much as you have outrage for what's going on here.
Kamala Harris and others
I have outrage for. I have outrage about a whole bunch of stuff. So if we want to go down that line, we can.
Okay.
When I watched that, I couldn't help but think about how Rick Santorum is someone who claims to be a Christian. He's an evangelical. He claims that his religion is a guiding principle for his worldview. But if that's the case, how could you not be concerned about the well-being of 1,500 children that the government lost track of? I don't get it. Any person who cares about the well-being of others should be concerned about this and should be outraged that we're unable to make contact with these 1,500 children. But especially, I would expect someone who espouses Judeo-Christian values to be more concerned, right? More concerned than the rest of us, but he's not. So he is a hypocrite. He is unable to follow his own biblical principles here. And really, I'm bringing religion into the mix here just to show how big of a hypocrite he is. But really, this is about human empathy and compassion. Perhaps all of them are safe. We don't know, but that's the point. The uncertainty is unsettling for individuals who care about these children, their children. Children are unable to fend for themselves like adults. So I think that if they came to the United States, regardless if it was with or without their parents, if they're in U.S. custody, we have to keep track of them and make sure that they're safe. So the fact that Rick Santorum and other Republicans, some, mind you, are just, washing their hands at the issue and saying, I don't really care, it really shows their true colors. They don't care about human beings. They're not pro-life. They don't care about others. And this proves it.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.